What's up and welcome to yet another bonus lesson. And this one's going to be very important you reference throughout your 3D career here, because just as you've learned to, say, optimize your workflow and speed things up in, say, After Effects by turning off different things that you don't need and RAM previewing and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be very important for you to also know how to optimize a scene for efficient and fast workflows inside of Cinema 4D. So we're talking things like, you might have experienced, you probably have experienced slowdown in your viewport, and there's different ways to tackle those types of things. Number one being layers. So let's kind of understand what causes viewport slowdown and how to address it and optimize your workflow and make you work faster, because faster means more of the monies, right? So here I have this scene here, and it's the Pug Dash animation that I finished here, and you can see that with all the effects, all the animation, all the stuff going on, this is playing at 1.1 frames per second. And so obviously we're not getting a good playback here. And even if we use that one trick where we skip all frames and have this play at real time, we are still, look at that. Look how skippy-dee-doo-dah that is, that I can't even see what that animation looks like of the pug plane, Gus the pug flying through all this stuff. So that's not going to work. So let's understand what's going on and let's address it. So some of the major contributors to viewport slowdown are, number one, the sheer amount of geometry and polygons in your scene. Okay, so if we go to the display garage shading with lines, you can see that it's not super dense with geometry. I would say the one thing you should watch out for if you are animating anything, and say the pug plane, that Gus the pug plane here, is almost black because of how dense the mesh is. And it's very important to understand like how far away, like how detailed do you need geometry to be if you know your camera is going to be very far away from it. So for example, this is a fixed camera. We don't need very high detailed model of Gus the Pug flying this plane to this point. So if we go and we want to get out of our default or our Redshift camera we have here, so I'm looking through my camera, it's actually locked. But if I want to get out of it, I can either click this button or I can click and hold this little option up here and go to my default camera. If we just zoom in on the Gus the Pug plane, you can see it's a very dense mesh, and we don't need all of that information. We don't need that much detail because this object's going to be so far away from us. So one thing we can do is you can notice that we're using subdivision surfaces to smooth out the original geometry here. So number one is we can take advantage of the subdivision viewport and the subdivision renderer. So what this means is that we can actually change this to only subdivide a certain amount of times in the viewport view and then render at a completely different render view. So we can keep the subdivision renderer higher, but we can take, say, both of the plane and the propeller and bring that down to, say, 1 or even 0. Okay, and you can see that now we have just a very chunky plane. Of course, we have Gus the Pug that we have to deal with, and he is very dense with geometry. So you just bring that down to 0. That's a lot better. Let's see if we have anything else. The ears, bring that down to 0. And so we're removing some geometry we don't need. And also the fact that these are adding geometry based on a generator. So this is the second thing that contributes most to viewport slowdown, and that is things like generators, deformers, expression-based tags like align to spline and your vibrate tags. All of those things are calculating all the time and require some bit of calculation speed and render speed to have that all calculate in your viewport. So one thing that's also helpful to manage all of those types of things is using things like layers. Okay, so I'm going to just twirl this up. Let's go back into our Redshift camera here. And so these are all our polygons. I think that's fine. Let's hit N and then A to get back to garage shading without lines. And let's actually just see what's going on here. So if I hit play right now, you can see that even though we remove some of the geometry from our pug plane here, this is still really super slow. Our frames per second are 1.2. Now it's 1. So we really didn't impact our viewport playback speed very much by just removing the subdivision surface subdivisions that are on just that one object. So what's helpful is diagnosing where the slowdown's coming from. And so how you can do that is when you are building your scene, grouping things into layers, and that will allow you a lot of flexibility in terms of testing to see what's slowing things down. Like if I remove, say, the cloud floor, if I go and just hide that from view and then remove all these calculations as well. So remember, these calculations, this is viewport visibility, this is render visibility, so we really don't even need to mess with that. This is animation, if it's toggling your animation on or off. This is toggling whether generators are active. This is deformers, whether they're active or not in calculating. This is expressions, and this is XREFs. XREFs we're not covering. They're basically like After Effects pre-comps, but we don't have them in our scene. So let's go and let's turn off those major things. So the visibility, the animation, the generators, deformers, and expressions. So these are all the things that I mentioned actually contribute to viewport slowdown. So let's see if it was the cloud floor contributing any of that. And so you can see that, not really. We really haven't sped up our frames per second here very much at all. So it's not the clouds. The one thing I do know is slowing everything down is these stars. So I added these stars, and what they're doing is they are kind of attached to the cloud floor that is being displaced and kind of undulating. So if I just kind of solo the stars and then the cloud floor, let's see how fast this goes. You can actually see that this is very, very slow. So it's definitely not the cloud floor, it's the stars that is causing everything to slow down. You might be wondering, well, why? It's just stars, right? They're just sitting on the cloud. Well, what I ended up doing is you can see as this is undulating, see this star right here? As this is undulating, the deformer is displacing the clouds. Those stars are kind of attached and sticking to the surface of the clouds here. So how you can do that is by using something called a constraint tag. A constraint tag can be a very costly thing to calculate. Okay, so let me just go and I'll demonstrate how you can do this. So I'm just going to command click and drag this star. So I got this star right here. And why I place this under a null is so I can have the constraint tag attach or work on the null, and then so the null can be attached to the surface, and then I can move the star underneath that null. So let me just go and place this, let's just say over here. So I got this star. Let's place it over here. Let's make it really big too. And what I'm going to do is I want to have this just be attached to the cloud floor. So what I'm going to do is on this null, I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to rigging tags. And so this rigging, oh boy, that's jumping off the deep end, but we can use certain types of rigging tools to do non-character animation or character rigging type of thing. So constraint tag. So what are we going to constrain? We are going to clamp this and clamp this to a surface. Okay, so the surface is going to be the target, and that target is this cloud floor. And we are going to clamp this to the surface of this cloud floor. You can see this popped all the way up there, but you can see that red line is a connection to that cloud object. So I'm going to go and I'm going to say, yes, we're going to fix the position. We are going to align it to the positive Y. That's fine. But you can see this distance is all the way out there. We're going to zero that out. We don't want any distance between this star axis center and the actual surface of the cloud. And we're going to align this in the positive Y, and we'll just use this as a Phong normal. And so what this means is that there's a Phong tag and there's normals, and it's basically just align this to the surface along the normals of this object. So remember, normals, they are which direction your polygons are facing. So you're basically just aligning this to the same alignment as your one polygon normal. And then we can lock that position as well if we wanted to, but we don't need to do that for this. We could also use normals, so I'll turn that on. And so now if we go and we kind of toggle through here, you can see how that just kind of updated and kind of moved there. And so why this is applied to the null there is that I can go and independently rotate this star, and you can see that that is now sticking to the cloud. And you can see that there's a little bit of delay there too. And that's just Cinema 4D is just calculating all these things, and sometimes there's a little bit of a lag. So this tag, I'm sorry, that's like a little bit of a tangent. Constraint tags are really great. I highly recommend you go and you dig deeper because there's so many different options you can do as well. But again, it's way more handy when it comes to, say, character rigging and character animation and stuff like that. But there's tons of good content out there about constraints and constraint tags. But constraint tags are a type of expression, okay? So if I go to the layers here, and you can see we can turn off and deactivate expressions of any object that is assigned to this star layer. So let's just say, if you forgot how to add things to layers, so I'm just going to remove, let me desolo this. So I got these two objects, right? And I want to add them to the stars layer. Well, I can do one of two things. I can go and drag and drop those objects underneath the stars layer, or the layer you want to add them to, but you have to, kind of select them both and add them like that. Or let me undo that. What you can do is click and drag that layer and drag it on top. And so that will add it to that layer. Or if you hold down the Command or Control key and release your mouse, you will add not only that top parent, but all the children underneath here. So if I went and just went remove from layer, all of these objects, let me do that real quick. So remove from layer. So all of those star objects are removed from that star layer. But if I wanted to get the star null and all the children objects as assigned to this layer, hold the Command and Control key down, release my mouse, and that will then add all of those objects, that object and the children object to that layer. Okay, so now we can solo it, and you can see all those things there. And if we know that the expression, the constraint tags are the thing that's causing this to slow down so much, we can just deactivate the expressions. So let's go and hit play now. And you can see that, wow, this is running a lot faster. We went from 1 frame per second to 15, okay? And if you're running at 15 frames per second or 24 frames per second in your scene, you're almost halfway there to real time. And so you can see that those stars are no longer moving along with the clouds, but if you're just focusing on the animation of the plane, going through all these hoops and really fine-tuning the animation, you don't need all that stuff to calculate or even be on the screen at all. You can hide all that stuff. You even hide it from your hierarchy here by clicking this button in the animation and all that kind of stuff. So an easier way to do this is if you know you are going to want to focus on the plane here and how it's animating through all the obstacles, well, what you could do is place the obstacles in one layer, place the plane or the object you're animating in one layer, and then solo both of them. So if we got our plane group, let's solo that. This is running super fast now because soloing deactivates every other object in your scene that's not part of this layer. And so where are the obstacles? It's right here as well. So we took a little bit of a hit as far as timing go, but we're still well above 24 frames per second, so we're still seeing this in real time. And so we just soloed the plane group and the obstacles, so now we can just focus on animation here without bogging down our viewport with all these other very, scene elements, environment elements that we don't need for this specific workflow task of animating Gus the Pug flying through all of these obstacles. So soloing things is very important. Same thing with if you wanted to, say, deactivate, you can click and drag downwards. You can't click and drag going horizontal here. So that's kind of a pain in the butt, is you can't click and drag from left to right here. So that doesn't work, but you have to go and do that manually. So you turn off all the deformers and all that kind of stuff. So you can see the deformer got turned off of that little rainbow there. That's basically a spline wrap. Turn that off, turn off the expressions. You can see, so what do we got animating? We got the cloud floor, and we don't have the animation of the plane group anymore because how is that plane being animated? By a line to spline tag. What is a tag? An expression. So if we turn on all those things and the animation, so you can see if we turn the expression off, our line to spline is not working. Okay, see that? So now if we turn that on, so we can still have all the elements in our scene, but just turn off all the things that are creating all that slowdown, and we can still kind of, you know, get things working, moving and grooving here. So I'm just going to turn back all of these things by clicking and dragging downwards, turning everything back on again. And you can see that now we're back to square one where everything was super slow. But with just a couple clicks, boom, we can just focus on and isolate the things we need to take care of. So making sure that when you're building out your scene, you're grouping things and naming things accurately. So all these tubes and stuff like that. So you want to always be grouping things together, naming them, and then when you know that you might need to use them and solo them or turn off certain aspects of them like generators and stuff, apply it to a layer. So these platforms, those are obstacles. So I assigned them to a layer because I knew that I was going to animate the plane, and I was going to animate the plane going through all these obstacles. So it takes some forethought to group things together. So I have like the cloud floor as its own separate thing because it's its own separate beast with its own, if you look at it, where's the cloud? Where's the cloud floor? So it's its own object. And also, if I desolo that, you can see there's a displacer under here that I forgot to add to that layer. So remember, just go and drag and drop that there. And so if I solo that, you can see the displacer's on there. And if I ever wanted to just deactivate the displacer, well, that's a deformer. Just deactivate that. Just check on, turn off the deformer. So D is deformer, and that'll turn that off. And once you get used to dealing with layers, and really it's just building in that habit, building good habits as you're working, you are going to work so much faster. When I first started learning Cinema 4D, I did not pay any attention to any of this stuff at all. And I was trying to dial in animation with this, and that was not very smart. So you're learning way better than I did. You're getting a great start, way better than I did back in the day when I first started learning this. But there's so many other things and tips and workflows that you'll discover as you progress in your 3D career and even using Cinema 4D. You'll find that almost any application has different ways to optimize your viewport, you know, by turning different things off. And again, it's just building in those habits to really set yourself up for success. So hopefully these tips will set you up for success throughout the rest of this course and your career so you can work smarter, not harder. I'll see you in the next video.